polyamory, all in 3 hours. Amazing how much I got done. How can you do that in 3 hours? It's crazy. 3 hours. Come on.
Have you joined the Kink Society now at Sedge University? That's what I want to know.
The thing is, what gets to me is that those people who are now going to go away and become qualified in another year have done a section on kink, polyamory, kink and fetish. They've done 3 hours, that's it. And they haven't studied any trauma, because you don't study any trauma. So I said to all of them, you need to study trauma, and you need to study, if you want to get into this, you really need to study.
It's really interesting, your perspective, because you're viewing it from that perspective, and I agree, it's very, minimal. But I'm thinking that's 3 hours more than most people will have had doing that degree, and they've had it delivered by yourself, so that actually feels like high standard of awareness within that course, whereas some of them are exiting with absolutely nothing at all. So,
yeah. It's quite shocking, to be fair. I really do think you need to question your therapist. And some people said I could never work with a kinky person or a panic person. So it's all really out there, that prejudice. Anyway, yeah, people don't. Karis just said, damn right, Poppy, I had absolutely no training in it. And people don't. But I remember my psychosexual psychotherapy course that I did. Considering it's psychosexual psychotherapy, so it's supposed to be all about couples and about sexual issues, be they good or bad, we didn't do any work on trauma, and we spent 1 weekend out of the whole year in polyamory, kink, and alternative sexualities, as they put it. 1 weekend.
And that's on that other specific course. If you're doing general psychology, you can imagine.
It's a bit like seeing a doctor, isn't it? The amount that they study on mental health is incredibly small. Oh, right, thanks. I suspect there's nobody better to cover this subject. They were so nice to me. They loved me, and I was really appreciative. They were very kind. Their feedback was outrageously good. And I was speaking to my supervisor, who's Dominic, who runs Pink Therapy this morning, and I was talking about a course I did the other day, put on by somebody who I think is a real expert in this area, and I went to their workshop. And it's just really interesting to see where your knowledge lies, because we all think we know it all, and do we or don't we, or how much more is there to learn? It's interesting. Right, so we've got a lot of questions. So the questions we've got, and I'm going to read them all, and then we go back and we'll start with the first one, if that's all right for everybody, if you want to. Sticking kink and polyamory together is presumptive too. I mean, I didn't. I separated them, and somebody said, so is kink and polyamory the same as swinging? I went, nope, you've added a whole nother thing in there as well. And it's so true, isn't it, that we have to look at those differences. Swinging has nothing to do with polyamory, which has nothing to do with kink, which may have nothing to do with swinging, and yet they might all be in there.
Well, embarrassing disclosure, I watched Naked Attraction last night. I didn't actually watch it, guys. It was on in the background. Naked Attraction was on, and that was really interesting because you had a married couple with a pickers for the first time ever, and they were making a big deal about they had a polyamorous couple picking. But in actual fact, they picked a person, and the person that they picked was clearly kinky, and they all went back and had some fun with one another. But what was interesting was the polyamorous couple were quite naive to, you imagine, they're there, they're doing the picking, but they were enlightened by the single person that they picked. He was a lot younger than them, so I was in their 20s, and this was a married couple with 4 kids who traditionally looking, from the outside window were quite traditional. And it was a really interesting episode actually to see the 3 that was put together, and they actually remained a couple. They went on holiday after the show, which if anyone watches Naked Attraction is very unusual. They normally don't pair well on that programme. So I found that very interesting, talking about how separate they are, and that was a very mainstream piece of TV. So it was interesting.
We are definitely lumped together, and there is a crossover. Without a doubt, there is a crossover, but it isn't everybody all of the time. So Mr. Peep at university is learning how to ask questions and an overview of potential answers. I agree. It's when you start to do your master's or your doctorate that you answer more questions, for sure. Cinders wrote, speaking from personal experience as a client, too many people like to think they know more than they do. I had an awful experience last week with so-called pro. Is that pro as in pro-dominant, pro that sort of thing? But you don't have to answer that either if that's really personal. Please don't feel that you have to.
No, I think it's a professional as in a professional when you read the rest of it.
He stated that my mental health, well, I'm just wondering, because there are a lot of domes and doms out there who profess to cure people's mental health as well. There are a lot of those. Oh, okay, at the job centre. I was a professional in the mental health care team at the job centre. Can I just say, if you are a mental health care person, you probably only have to have done a couple of months training. Or if you're a care worker, like, or you maybe have got a mental health first aid certificate. Those experts aren't experts at all, and it's always worth checking out, looking at. Who stated that my mental health was all learned helplessness. Gosh, and told me that her menopause was worse. So yeah, be careful out there, folks. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That's such a judgmental opinion. Even if she has that judgment, I would disagree. But even if she has that judgment, or he, did you say she? She, yes. So, shut up. You don't have to say it. At the end of the day, shut up.
The clue's in the title, though, isn't it? Job centre.
Yeah, it is. It is. What's my job? It's to get you back to work and get you off the list, and that's all I care about. Right, so let's go through some of these questions as we've got them. I'm so sorry that you had that experience, and even as Cara said, that's awful. Not nice. So, the questions we've been asked, and I've got them down here, so I'm going to read them, but I probably need my glasses on.
But I've been organised and got a list too, don't you know? I know.
What do we do when we have someone who is unable to speak up for what they want and don't want, even in a low pressure environment? What's that all about? The next question is, what's the best way for these people to navigate the kink world in the short term and also to work on the issue in the long term? Any advice for negotiating the scenes with someone like this, or advice for doing kink with them more generally? I'll be very short. Okay. I get super anxious around having sex, doing kink with people that I don't already have that kind of relationship with. Could any part of that be because I'm demi? I can't unpack if a part of it is, or I just don't have the desire in the first place. I have recently become single after, this is the next one, I've recently become single after splitting with my partner, who's also my submissive, who I was happily monogamous with. Do you have some tips on moving on, as it's affecting me quite deeply? So any help will be massively appreciated, as I feel I have lost 2 relationships, my vanilla relationship and my dynamic. The next question is, what actually is a daddy's job? Don't know, whatever pays him. Sarcastic, we'll come back to that one. Next question, how do you keep negotiation fun? Next question, how can you figure out what it is you want in kink? For example, do I want DS, do I want play, etc. Next question, when is a reasonable amount of time after the end of a dynamic relationship to start reaching out to play for non-sexual based kink? I asked that person, I went back again and I said, do you mean with the same person or with somebody else? And they actually mean with somebody else. The next one was, how can we heal ourselves after harming another person unintentionally during the relationship, the scene, etc. And the next one is, are there places for dom to dom training? I've only ever seen advertisements for dominatrix dummies, but never anything for the male equivalent. There seems to be a lack of dom support in my local scene. Should I start something like this up? Where would I even begin? And the last one is, how do we help somebody else heal? It's an interesting, diverse set of questions, isn't it? So let's start with the first one. What do we do when we have someone who is unable to speak up for what they want and don't want, even in a low pressure environment? What's all that about? Poppy, if you've written it, what's your opinion on that one?
I mean, I think obviously we deal with people who struggle to self-advocate all the time, certainly in our line of work, and that there is a long list of whys behind that. You know, some of them are based in trauma and some of them aren't. You know, that's a whole session right there. But the reality is, if people are unable to speak up for themselves, they're unable to negotiate. You know, within a scene, within a relationship, it's hard to know what the parameters of this actual question are. But there are other ways to communicate as well. It's interesting. You know, I've worked with people before, and they've communicated. We talk all the time about having a user manual. You know, how do you have a manual that explains what your preferences are, what your needs, what your preferences, what your desires, what your goals, what your objectives? You know, we can have. I'm so excited, guys. I'm going on holiday, but I've been looking at a guide to how I access the place that I'm going on holiday to, and it's in picture form. It's designed for people who might struggle with big wordy documents, and it's a picture form guide about how to have the best time possible in the magical kingdom, which not about where I'm going. However, my point is, there's more than one way to communicate, isn't there? And how are we communicating with people? If we absolutely cannot ask for what we want, is there a way of writing some stories in relation to what our sexual fetishes are, what are our desires? You know, I remember when I was very, very, very new to the scene, one of the things that I loved to do was scroll literotica and find stories that aroused me and made me excited, and shared them with a doll, and they would write stories for me that made me special, and would share them with me. And that was a way of us communicating what we wanted to do with one another. It was lovely. There's more than one way it's going to happen when it comes to communication. communication. So what exactly are you struggling with and why? However, for me personally, I cannot enter into a relationship where I'm topping somebody or playing with somebody if they're not able to negotiate. If you can't enter into that contracting, then it can't take place. Does that mean we can be compassionate and sensitive to how we do that? Of course it is. And the whys, I'm not sure the whys are really relevant here. I don't think it matters. But I think if somebody does have a real why that is associated with an impediment in terms of communication, they need to be, for me, taking responsibility to be doing something about that. It's not my position to fix that or to come on to a question about healing later on. That's not necessarily my position and my role, but I would want to see that they would be taking steps to address their own personal lives. What do you think, Rose?
I agree. I think so. I would break this up into sections personally. So, what do we do when someone is unable to speak up for what they want and don't want, even in a low pressure environment? Well, first of all, you need to be curious. You need to find out why. But if you can't find out why, that's something else. So, we need to educate ourselves. We need to keep in mind there's a reason that the person isn't talking. We need to be aware of our own frustration so that we're very careful about how we handle that person. We need
low pressure. I mean, that's interesting. We're talking here. This is probably a lower pressure environment to articulate oneself for you than it is for me, for example. But, and that's just given in terms of how we're our comfort zones. If we're wanting somebody to talk in a low pressure environment and we're expecting them to communicate verbally one-on-one, sitting together, holding hands, looking into each other's eyes, which is what we might advocate in relationship work, that might be some of the highest pressure environment you can possibly get for certain people. So I think even that, we need to define what is low pressure for each person communicating first. So
yeah, no, I agree with you that and it's like what's going on here is interesting, isn't it? And what is low pressure? Because some people will turn around and find that a high pressure environment is really easy to talk in because that's what they're used to. They're used to talking under pressure. And other people find a low pressure part. So it's also about understanding and asking what's going on here. I completely agree that there are very different versions of communication. I've had clients in here, especially children, who I've had to Snapchat or WhatsApp. We don't actually talk. I have one person who's completely mute by choice, and we have to use a whiteboard or some kind of sign language. They will eventually start talking, but that's not the goal. We're trying to get rid of their PTSD. So there are lots of reasons, and we have to be okay with silence. However, I cannot and will not ever advocate a play relationship where risk is involved, where the other person will not negotiate, not talk, and not share what is okay by them or not. I have some really unpopular opinions around this sort of stuff. I'm really aware I do, and I 100% own them. I'm not playing with somebody who can't ask for what they want, who can't tell me to stop, whom I can't tell to stop, anybody who cannot communicate what it is they want or need on an ongoing basis. I've done that before in my life. I am not interested anymore from a personal relationship perspective. And I would say to most of my clients, how do you get what you want? How do you agree anything if the other person cannot talk to you? And how can you know when they're not okay? There are lots of ways that we can communicate that they're not okay. We don't just need to be able to talk. We can use pictures, we can use mood boards, we can galvanic skin responses, verbal, non-verbal, and it's horrific, isn't it? Sometimes if we don't communicate in that way, but it's bloody beautiful if we do. It's all about finding somebody that works with you. And I'm still going to go back to the basics on that one for me. If somebody cannot talk for whatever reason, and they have a very valid reason, be that trauma, be that loss, be that experience, be that pressure from others, be that mental health issues, be that physical health issues. If you can't advocate for yourself in a play world of BDSM or polyamory, don't be an idiot. That's quite shocking, isn't it? And please feel free to disagree with me. Don't be an idiot, because actually you're about to do something that we have to be very risk aware of, but it's my risk too. My risk is on the table with yours. And if I know that you can't advocate for yourself, what is going to happen at some point when something potentially goes wrong? And it always goes wrong. Surely we have to plan for when something goes wrong. So for what it's all about is many reasons, but actually the reasons don't really matter in the here and now for the communication. If we're with someone and then somebody said, what is the best way for somebody? So they then said, what's the best way for these people to navigate the kink world in the short term? don't. Unless you know someone or you're having a great time. I don't know, let me ask you, if anyone here is a top or a bottom, do you want to play with somebody who cannot say no, who cannot say yes, who cannot advocate for themselves, and has no boundaries, no limits that they can discuss, and who shuts down every time something is wrong? Is that an ideal play partner? You might have lots of feelings and emotions, but that, for me, I think what we have to do, which is one of my favourite words, is we have to pre-mortem. Alongside fight, flight, freeze, we have friend, fuck, flop, thumb, and fawn, which these third year students had never heard of.
Wow.
Oh my God. But if that person fucks or fawns from this perspective, or friends, or any of those things, it's a potentially very dangerous relationship, because you have the potential there for somebody to have retroactive withdrawal consent, or say that they didn't quite agree, or they didn't know what they were agreeing to. Whereas if we can prove conversations, and we can show that we've had conversations, albeit written, picture, verbal, hearing, voice notes, there are many ways to communicate, it's not just face to face, then that's a problem.
And I think, I think one of the things as well, we're talking, giving a good talk about general communication, but looking back at the question, so I think the word that we haven't mentioned to you that's a standout for me is ask. And I think that word ask, we talk about that asking all the time. And what we're saying is that people have a difficulty to speak up for what they want. So essentially they're asking. And you can have people who are generally really quite empathic and fabulous communicators, but they're still not great at asking for what they want. And that is a different skin and time in terms of that exposure to the possibility of no, possibility of rejection, that sensitivity. How do you make that systemize that feeling safe? And we're talking about how do you navigate the scene in the short term. I agree, some people, the answer is don't work on yourself first. But I think there is a way in a system and process of being able to talk to people who you feel emotionally safe with regards to, and practice and asking for things. How do you group things together in terms of, can we do X, Y, or Z? So one of those things is like, what does that look like? How do we feel emotionally safe to be able to do that? And if you are not very good at asking for things, you start asking for things that you are likely going to be able to get from the people who are going to be most willing to give you them. Essentially, that's what I'm talking about. And you build up from there. So for me, it is, I think within that question, is this a general, you don't know what you want and you can't advocate because you can't speak up for yourself? Or is it that you're not able to negotiate and therefore ask them why?
So how do you cultivate self-advocacy, which is what Explorers asked? It is that, as Bobby just said, you start small, you experiment, you have to take a risk. You have to work out what it is that you want, what are your values, what are your ethics, what are your goals, what are your morals. It's quite deep. Is this something that you want? And that question comes up later. Self-advocacy is our capacity to state what we want. So you start small. I mean, how many people here, I said this before in these workshops, when you're asked, if I say, well, Poppy, do you want a takeaway? What do you want? And she might say, I don't mind, you choose whatever. Does she really mean that if I get something really exotic or strange? Or is it better for us to say, I'd quite like this or I'd quite like this? And then we have to start to negotiate. I watched my daughter with 3 or 4 of her friends around the radiator years ago, and that's the story I always give of, what do you want? I don't mind. What do you want? Should we eat at home? I don't mind. Whatever's easiest. Would you want a takeaway? I don't mind. For me, that conversation isn't going anywhere. Everyone needs to start with, I would like. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. But we have to find a voice to be able to say, I would prefer, please may I have. Would we consider? Voices who use tip lists to get to know their experiences and knowledge. They can also be lied in. I think we have to take everyone at face value. Oh yeah, I've done that. I love that. I've done loads of that. Or we tell stories about what we've done, and actually there are also a lot of liars around. We also assume that age means experience. It doesn't. Somebody of 25 can have 5, 7 years more experience than somebody of 30 or 40 or 50. It depends when they started. And most people are saying, no, they wouldn't. Hell no, big no. Wow. And then Mark says, no, it's too dangerous. Unequal communication is such a key pillar in BDSM. And then it was a lot of self-reflection and introspection, yes, but at some point you've got to get off your ass and do it. So it's a lot of experimentation as well. It's our capacity to go out and say, and that's why I was saying, start with something small. Even if you got to a bloody ice cream van and very clearly say, can I have a 99 2 flakes, please, instead of 1? Just do something a little bit different that starts to get you out there. Or if you notice a group of people and they're all organising something. When my kids were young, I'm still a massive cinema goer. I love the cinema. I probably go every week by myself, really happily, sit down in my large sofa that belongs to every man, get myself some food and watch something, going tomorrow night. I would ask my kids to negotiate as to what they were going to see. And oh my God, the three eldest, they would negotiate, they would look at trailers and they would do all of that. And they were funny. And then at the end, my youngest would sit there with her arms crossed and I'd say, have you picked? I've watched it every time. They'd say, yep. And Erin would say, I haven't. And it took them months to learn to include her in the process so she didn't have the power at the end. But that was a them problem, not a me problem. I would mention it and say, oh, so again, Erin hasn't been included. Erin, you need to include yourself. Girls, you need to include Erin. It goes both ways. But we will always be in this process again until you do. So it's all about taking a little bit of a risk. What are you scared of? What's the consequence of this? So choose something with minimal consequence at first. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, okay, thank you. And then what we've also got to learn to do is not take a no personally. I don't want to do that. And I don't want to be with you even. It's not always personal, and often it is. There's something about us in some way, shape or form. I think what we have to be when we're working with somebody who doesn't want to talk to us, we've got to be honest. We have to say, there's no point getting mad, there's no point getting even, there's no point panicking, there's every point saying, this is really difficult for me too, this is impacting the relationship that we have. So before you react mindlessly or recklessly, have a little introspection and think and say, right, don't be pushy, don't be desperate. I got ghosted today, something chronic by somebody, and I'm really upset about it. And I wrote one message saying, if you're out, that's okay, I totally understand that. And if we're not okay, did I do something wrong? Did you? Was this all a lie? Any of those are okay. I would prefer knowing, but I don't have the right to know because that's the truth at the end of the day. I wish you well. And that's how I've left it because I can't do anything else. What's the point about beating myself up? So make it more pleasant, make it easier. Be respectful. We don't know what's going on with that person. You don't understand their history, their past. Don't pressure them. The more you push, the more someone pulls away. A gentle leadership, putting your hand out is really important. Some people will never be okay with their own feelings, their own thoughts, but they're really not okay if they're backed into a corner. That makes a real difference as well. We can give them a time limit. We can say, perhaps you could answer within 24 hours. Is that fair? Is that reasonable? What would you like to negotiate? Even that teaches someone to have a voice. And what's your preferred method? How could we do it? Or how would this be best for us to talk? And be proactive, like, hey, I saw this video, I thought you might like to watch it. What could we do about this? And just remember about these circles, you've got these sort of like the rings or the circles of control or power that we have. You cannot control the situation, but you can control how you respond to it. And that's also about understanding how it is and how it is for you and what that actually means as well. All we can do is respect their decision. I respect your decision, however it isn't for me. We speak a lot about boundaries, and Poppy always brings up the word preferences. A boundary means you will keep it. The consequences, if you do that, I will leave you. That's what a boundary is. I'm going. Most people use the word boundary when they really mean the word preference. So if we say, if you do that again one more time, young lady, I'm going to flush your head down the toilet, you better fucking mean it. Otherwise, what's the power of your say, of your participation in that? It doesn't work. So if we say to somebody, it's not okay, you can't do that to me, I don't want you to do that, you mean a preference. If you're going to stay, if you're going to leave, then that's a boundary. Most of us won't leave. And that's why when I'm working with couples, we do bronzes, silvers and golds. The golds mean you're going to leave. And you'd be surprised how many people say gold is something along the lines of having sex with somebody else. Do you mean consensually? Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Right. And so the information is really important. There are things we don't know that people are going through and they find it really hard. We have to accept somebody else's decision to not talk. When I'm working with this very young man and him choosing not to talk for 4 years, he's 18 years old, hasn't said a word in 4 years. Everyone else wants him to talk. I have very clearly stated to him, I completely accept and respect your decision not to talk, but don't expect me to understand you. I will do my best. I think we need to work on the PTSD that you've got. We'll work through that. If your voice happens to come back and you want to find your voice, that's your choice. It has to be someone else's choice. However, I don't have to put up with that, even as a therapist or as another human being. Titsub says, parenting has really taught me to only say what I mean, no point in ultimatums or extreme threats. Yeah, I was seeing a family, and every time the mum would say, if you do that again, I'll pick you up for adoption. You might think it and feel it, but all the kids would do go, fucking hell. And we know that eye rolling is one of the most dangerous things in relationships, according to the Gottmans, so it's not good. So we can't force. We can just say how it is for us and work out what we want to do, and that's as far as we can go. And if you can't do more than that, you really have to think about, is this right for me?
My best friend at school, her parents used to go better than that. They used to do that. And they used to pack an actual suitcase, put the kids in the car, and drive past the local children's home and threaten to drop them off there every time.
But did it work?
No, of course it didn't. And interestingly, now they're adult, they've got a relationship with their parents. But anyway, digress.
No, but only once I said to my mum, that's it, I'm going to live at grandma's, I hate you. And she said, would you like me to help you pack a bag? And I said, yes, I do. I think I wasn't very old, I think I was about 7 or 8. And she helped me pack a bag. And she said, how are you going to get there? I said, I'm going to walk. It was like 15 miles, I don't even know the way. I'm just a young child trying to assert herself. And she actually let me go. Now, she kept her eye on me all the way, and I went to the end of the road, and I was like, I don't know what to do. But sometimes we have to realise that, to come back and say and talk. And as Kara says, funny that, which is an awful thing to do. It's not pleasant, is it? That level of threat doesn't even work in a power exchange relationship. But if somebody will not talk up for themselves, we can't do anything. Right, so the next question. We need to move on, and we're never going to get through all these. I know. The next one was, I get super anxious around having sex, doing it with people that I don't already have that kind of relationship with. Could any part of that be because I'm Demi? I can't unpack it, but part of it is that I just don't have the desire in the first place. What do you think?
I found this question really interesting because it boiled down to me as I'm finding it difficult to establish new relationships. I can't have a relationship without having an established relationship. So it's that kind of paradoxical relationship, isn't it? I want connection, yet how do I form connection when I don't yet have connection? And it felt like the person who was in this was really stuck. That was kind of the standout that I got from that. I don't know what you took away from it. I don't think that I agree with the assertion that is it more difficult harder to tell if you're demi rather than heterosexual or homosexual. I found that quite interesting. Do people struggle with that identification of sexuality? And I wondered for you, I don't find that the case, but do we work with and have exposure to more people who self-identify as demisexual than is ordinary in our line of work? Because that's who I think. But I found that interesting because I work with lots of people who self-identify as demisexual, and it feels like it's quite a common identification. So I don't know. What did you think about that?
Do I identify as demisexual? No, I have loved my whoredom. I have loved being a complete and utter slut, and I own those things entirely. My figures hit more towards 1,000 than they do 100. I've had a great time in my life, and I've played with a lot of people, and I've really enjoyed it, and I've very much chosen to do all of those things. Nowadays, unless there isn't a connection, I don't want to have sex. So is it the sexual part? Is it the connection part? You cannot have a connection without creating a connection. So I agree with you on that. You have to do some kind of effort. There is no choice there. So is it that we just don't want to put the work in? I think a lot of people are very tired. We find relationships really hard. We're really struggling to do relationships at the moment. When we read something, we identify with it, like Demi, does it become, oh, well, I'm that, so therefore I won't? But actually, if you are Demi, you do have to make the effort to establish a connection.
And instinctively, I mean, and obviously we must do this all the time, the word's missing from the question, but I felt like what was missing from it was trust a little bit. I feel like maybe trust has been broken here, or, how do I establish a trusting relationship, regardless of how you identify and how sexual you want that to be, if I don't, or if that trust isn't already there, and what's that? It feels almost like it's taking that first steps towards being emotionally vulnerable, or just vulnerable in any sense. Why is that difficult? And it mustn't have always been the case, because you're saying that you had established relationships where you had that connection. So for me, what's different? Why were you able to establish those relationships and now you're really struggling, or it feels hard? That would be the question. If you were in my therapeutic space, I'd guess.
And also that classic therapy thing of, is the answer in the question slightly as well? Because is it that I just don't have the desire in the first place? Maybe. What if it is?
Maybe it is actually, is that off the list there? You know, you said, you mentioned 3 sexuals in that question, but we have missed the asexual.
Yeah, and it's a big deal, isn't it? So, like, do I even want to? Can I be bothered? Am I frightened of the hurt? Or is it I just can't put the effort in? What is it? And that needs some real curiosity around it, some breaking down into much smaller parts to see. And I think a lot of people are very tired. I think a lot of people don't want to make the effort. It takes a lot of work. And what's in it for me, long term, if I invest in this, what if it doesn't go anywhere? Where do I go with this? It's so hard, I think. It really is. So I think that takes a little bit of work with somebody, life coach, therapist, maybe a mentor, whoever, but a little bit of curiosity about, I wonder what that means, and to break it down into smaller pieces. And for me, it's all about how to break it down into your guts and your core, really. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? Do you want relationships even? What do you mean by that? You get really anxious about having sex and doing kink. So demi would mean that you want the relationship first. So therefore you would be anxious about it. If your experience, because it's the same person asking, has been with somebody who won't talk or communicate, you might have put in your mind that it's really anxiety inducing because you're not sure what the other person wants or what you want. And all of those things have a huge influence as well. So if you, it's again,
that's not the same. You did tell me in your message to me that I've not heard.
So if you've had real problems with somebody not talking to you, then I would be pretty scared of, do they want this? Is this okay? And then when we start putting things in our head, then it interferes with our other heads and our bodies in a total way. It makes us feel very anxious and frightened and worried because we TARDIS the same emotions and feelings onto somebody else each time. It is about seeing each person separately, and that's hard to do. The only common factor is you. So what are you bringing in? What are you TARDISing over that says, an open box, been here before? And that's that familiarity, and we just really have to think about that. And do we have desire? If we've been hurt sometimes, part of our coping mechanism says, fuck this, I'm out. And that doesn't mean we don't have desire, it means we're scared of the outcome. And they're two different things as well.
And one thing also, this person said that they're working through this with their therapist. Once that's, you know,
Yes, they are.
You know, there's lots of different ways to do lots of different therapy, but I always think it's quite interesting to take something very specific like this. If this is something that I've observed or I'm struggling with, or if I was going to write a question for a workshop, this is the question I would currently ask. I think, and I personally love when people do this, take that specific piece of work and have a session or a couple of sessions. Sometimes these things are more than take, you know, a massive piece of work, but let's take this and let's explore that. And I think that can be really, you know, really impactful. Parents to say, look, I want to talk about this. So, you know, I know you're also working through the wider issues, but I would take this as a question as you posed it to us, almost as a question to them. I think that would.
And flog it to death.
Yeah, essentially.
In real life, it works very well, but flog it to death. And let's keep going on it, and it's really worth it because it's so easy to get sidetracked sometimes. But if you tell somebody that you're working with and you are with a therapist that, hey, I just want to go here, I just want to go here, it's my job, it's Poppy's job to say, and we're going off. Why? What are we avoiding? What's happening? Let's go back. That can actually work. Okay, the next question was, I have recently become single after splitting with my partner as well as my submissive, who I was happily monogamous with. Do you have some tips on moving on? This affects me quite deeply, so any help would be massively appreciated, as I feel I've lost 2 relationships, my vanilla and my dynamic. What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of this is loss. It's grief. It is that normal grieving through a relationship process. And when you're in it, it feels absolutely horrendous. And you're going to get to the next stage. And you know, you've done an amazing writing, Dennis's writing. Someone will link to it on that process.
I will. I brought it up because I knew it was going to come up.
Of course you did. And I think it's really, you know, I think that's really important place to start. What I found really interesting about this question was feeling like you've lost 2 relationships. And the reality is you haven't lost 2 relationships, but you've lost 1 relationship. However, what specific needs were being met by that relationship? If it was me, I'd be looking at, you know, what needs were being met, how they were being met, and where they were being met. And that's where I would start. Because what you're saying is, this relationship fulfilled me, or there is a loss I'm grieving for, this set of needs and this set of needs. And the fact that you compartmentalised it is really interesting. It tells me about the relationship as well. But what did that look like? So if you're grieving for two relationships, you're grieving for two sets of needs that were met by that relationship. How do you better understand that? And then why, I think there was some context as to why this relationship broke down. But the reality is there was lots of things that you've identified as being really, core needs would have been met, otherwise you wouldn't feel that way. So it's about understanding that and allowing yourself that process, allowing self-compassion and all that kind of stuff, but allowing yourself to accept that relationship has come to an end and how can we move on from that. And I think it links into, a subsequent question, I don't know if it's the same person, but how quickly should you get, how long should you wait to get over somebody before you get under somebody? I think is essentially one of the questions that's coming up. And it's linked into this, and there's no right answer to that.
And this is the problem. I think we live in a world that is so fucking directed nowadays, where we are told that we have to do this, we have to do that, this is the appropriate amount of time. So, for example, if you look at the DSM-5, one of the recommendations for grief is that someone is given 2 weeks off work. Right, okay. Whereas in reality, 2 years is probably what's recommended. The first year to go over birthdays, anniversaries, Easter, Christmas, whatever you believe in, it doesn't matter. It does matter. But, and then the second time it's that much easier, and then you might need some help around that as well. And with that help, Mark's just said, apologies for the side question, are there any recommendations for kink-friendly practitioners? Poppy, do you have space? I certainly don't at the moment.
Yes.
Poppy has some space at the moment, although I've just recommended someone to you. I think they messaged you on FetLife. I definitely don't have space. The Pink Therapy Register, there's a couple of others, the NCSF, or whatever it's called. There's a couple, and I have mentioned them before. It's the NCSF, but the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, English and American and Australian practitioners are on there. Lots of us aren't, because I'm not paying for any of that shit. I haven't even got my own website anymore. Like, I just don't even bother paying for that. I go by recommendations only, and I'm pretty full a lot of the time. But when I have space free up, I say, and Poppy does have space. I don't often recommend people personally because I've never been their client. How can you tell? The questions I would ask if I was going for therapy wouldn't be how qualified are you. The best couples course I've ever been on was delivered by somebody about 20 years ago, or however long it was, who had 0 qualifications at that time. It's the best course I've ever been on. And I would go, his name was Steve, and I would go on any of his courses again if he was different. He was fucking brilliant. Whereas some of the most technically qualified people I know, I remember once being on a course, this person was reading out a book, and they said, have you got any feedback? I went, yeah, can you put the fucking book down? I'm really nice in my feedback. And I said, can you put the book down? Fucking book down is actually what. And he said, why? What are you saying? I said, I can read a book. I don't know the insight. I don't know the feelings. I don't understand the different options that there are right now. And I'm fully fucking qualified on like my 3rd and 4th course. But you're talking about, so it's just out of the book. I can read a book, and other people may or may not understand it, but let us ask questions around it. Don't just read from a book. So my question that I ask somebody if I'm going to see them as a therapist is, how much therapy have you had? Because like a lot of people stay in therapy for 3 to 4 years now. That's 160 odd hours. To be a qualified counsellor, you only need 80 hours. Some need none at all. I want to know you've done the journey. I want to know what your interests are, what sort of courses you've been on and why. And more importantly, I want to know how many hours you've got of experience. But in what? Why? Those are the questions I want to know. And who's your supervisor maybe? Why did you choose them?
Well, those are personal recommendations ultimately. Well, there's nothing wrong with going on one of the suggested websites that we've said.
Pink Therapy or
declare themselves to be kink aware, kink active, I think is even better if you can. And a lot of people will give you 10 to 15 minutes of their time free. Some people won't, which is again is absolutely fine. I know definitely, lots of people don't have that, but there's nothing to stop you booking an initial appointment and seeing this is a massive investment. If you can't book an appointment and say, right, this is a 2-way process that I'm supposed to figure out how to open it. And the reality is you get a feel. It's like buying a house, I will say, for another therapist. You have a feel very quickly in terms of what somebody's going to be able to do.
Walk into them, stuff your head up their vagina and see what's
Maybe not that. I'm thinking that just for the record. But yeah,
don't do that.
I think that's my advice. I think some of this is you have to take that step and then tried to romanticize, essentially. And anyone who has had a lot of therapy will say, I've not been a good fit with a therapist, I've seen a really good therapist that you haven't been a good fit, but I have. There's not a textbook how to get it right.
I think working out chemistry sessions are super important. I think working out, is this chemistry right? However, I also slightly disagree with that statement. And the reason I disagree with it is we can go for like chemistry, oh my God, we get on really well, but will that person challenge me then? Because are we just going to be best friends? Does this person get me? Can this person challenge me? Can this person hold me? Can this person hold my shit? They're the questions I want to know. I want to be challenged, but that's my way. And actually, most people that come and see me are fed up with being nodded at and agreed with. I think we're moving, I was talking to Dominic about this morning actually, because I've seen the vision. I think we're moving into a different world than Carl Rogers turned around and said that unconditional positive regard is really important, and it is. But isn't it also unconditionally positive to turn and say, is that good for you? And can this person be with me in my shit? Isn't always about chemistry. Can this person deal with my shit? Isn't always about chemistry. So I think they are important. When Darcy, my eldest daughter, was 15, about to do her GCSEs, she came home and she said, oh, fuck my life. And I said, what's wrong? She went, I've got Mrs. So-and-so for English. I fucking hate her. I said, and she loves English. It was one of those, she's definitely, A-star type material. And she turned around and she said, but you know what? I might fucking hate her, but she's a great teacher, so I'll still learn. And I was like, Jesus, you're grown up. And it was a really interesting thing to take. And Poppy on Tour says it's getting into contracting. It is getting to what does this relationship look like and how will it work? But if we're going to be best friends, I might start colluding with you too often. It might be my job not to. And so I just think we really have to just be aware of that, so it's not pure chemistry the whole time. I remember having really great chemistry with one therapist, and then within 6 sessions, all she did was cry.
Oh,
and I'm there sitting, what the fuck is your problem? And she had a fucking doctorate and a master's, and I was like, Jesus Christ. I had great chemistry with somebody I love as a therapist, Helena. God, I would go and see her tomorrow if I could, but I won't go and see her because, again, when it comes to kink, she thinks we're all damaged. She thinks we need pathologizing. So again, these questions need to be asked. Tell me, what is your experience of kink? What do you think about polyamory? What is your understanding? Why do you think we are the way we are? When I went into university, what I said was, why do you think BDSMers are into BDSM? What does that word even mean? But that acronym, BDSM, what does it mean? What does polyamory mean? Why are we the way we are? Do you think we're born made? Do you think we're fucked up? Do you think it's trauma? Which one of those? And why? And I would ask my therapist those questions too.
You've got to be able to chill the boundary, you've got to be able to challenge. And I mean, some therapists would disagree with that, but otherwise it's just retelling. You're just retelling if you have a therapist who's not challenging something. And that, I guess, it's place, but it's not long term going to provide, I guess, what we're looking for most people.
And Kara said, absolutely. I don't know whether that's chemistry or me saying challenge is more important on some level. And as soon as was, oh, geez, I had someone do that for me in 2000. As soon as you're having some really bad luck with some people recently, that's all I can say for the last quite a few years. The first experience of therapy and they reacted that way, I cut her off straight away after that. Yeah. And look, Helena's one of the best therapists I'll ever meet. She's fucking immense and her power is incredible. And she's a wonderful therapist, but she just thinks that anyone's into kink is damage. And I say just, and that's not something I can sit with. It's not something I want to collude with or say that is okay, so it's really hard. But how do you move on? Fuck me. The problem with moving on is you have to rewire your brain, and your brain is so clever. When you go into a breakup, what it likes to do is make you feel better. What does it do? It goes into your film archive and it says, let me play you this memory because this one makes you feel good. Do you remember when you were sitting on the bench? I don't can remember when I was sitting on the bench. That's the cunt I was just with. It's really cruel. It doesn't understand that doesn't make me feel better. And I read something the other day that was because I was waiting for luggage and this thing came up about luggage, so it really stuck with me. Sometimes your suitcase comes out first, sometimes it comes out last. You just have to wait. You don't know. And we don't know how long it takes for us to get over something that hurts us. It depends on our loss line as well. A loss line exercise is a really good thing to do. How much loss have you experienced? And it's not just about death. It's, did you move? Did you Did you move? Did you lose a dog or a cat or a hamster? Did you whatever? Mark, I hope you're okay because you've just outed yourself in your way. So I really hope you're okay with that. And I hope you're all right. And you've just actually said very clearly that if I'm totally honest, I feel like I'm genuinely never healed about this relationship. I can also tell you there isn't one person I've met who's grieving who has not said that. And the reality is we do feel like that in the moment. It doesn't mean it is a fact, it doesn't mean it is true, it means that we are grieving. So what we have to do is go into it. We have to play with it, we have to be in it, we have to maybe create boundaries around social media, we maybe have to talk about how we're going to communicate or not. Stop having sex with them. That's another thing. The amount of people who say, we split up, oh yeah, we did shag the other day, we did play the other day, we did do that. If you're broken up, we're broken up. It just creates Jesus a mess.
Only when it can be quite helpful as well. We talk about, I don't sound like you, but when we lose somebody in that traditional sense, we have a grief, we've got grieving for a lost death. We talk about that, grief is the price that we pay for love. And that doesn't necessarily always transfer easily into when a relationship breaks down and people have lost. But what was the value in relation to that? And I think you're right. We talk about grief as if we have an expectation that, it's going to move on from it quite quickly. You need at least a year because you need a year for every single first. And that's just the way that it is. But also, if you are grieving for a reason. You talked about feeling like 2 relationships have broken down, that you've lost that. What is that telling you? It might be that in actual fact, prior to that, you felt like you've lost a relationship, and a relationship has broken down, but this relationship has met lots of needs in terms of BDSM or the dynamic, the original dynamic. What does that tell you? And when I work with people, and there are people that I work with whose relationships are broken and they're grieving for that, how do we turn that into something that eventually is positive, and it is about moving on and with love? Very much of a growth mindset when it comes to loss of relationships. And you can't do that straight away. To try and do that straight away is really naive, but it's about, I guess,
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. How do you eventually reframe that into something that has some value?
And also, when you are looking through that reframe, and let's take the word frame, that's really important. When that video is playing in your head, or that cinematic reel is playing in your head, and look around on the cutting room floor and pick up the edits, because some of it was shit. We talk in absolutes, especially when we're hurting. Like, actually, still isn't on a picnic loss line. Mine's a few 100,000 miles long at the moment. I bet it isn't. I bet there's also some great stuff there, but it's how we see stuff. Even in the worst of days, there are the most magical moments. Even in the moments that we feel are overwhelming, there is still good. We also have to look at the language we use, the way we convince ourselves, and what we do. And Roy said his whole life keeps replaying in his head. So replay it, see it through. It's really important. Tits, I've said, Mark, I was in such a mess last December, do the work, with a therapist. Or somebody who knows a lot about loss. When we keep going to our friends, it's too much for a lot of our friends to deal with. It's too intense, it's too heavy, and depending on their mood, it will influence. A therapist shouldn't be influenced by their mood. Ask my clients today, I've got no idea. I think it was all right. So I think we just have to be very aware. Be angry, call them a cunt, tell them you love them in your head, do all of those things, and let it work. I hate, strong word. I hate it when I look on any form of social media and someone says, oh, just be strong, you'll be okay, just be strong. Stoicism is completely overrated in that moment. Cry. Don't brood. Don't let it stick with you. Have those emotions. And statistically and experientially, anyone who has been brought up as a boy or a man has a lot more issues with that because they've been taught not to. But it's really important that we do it. And as Carrie says, often you need 2 years. So the first one becomes second and you survive. It's really important, isn't it? You have to show that you can. And my definition of trust is very different to somebody else's. Even if I've been really upset by someone today, I'm okay to feel upset, I'm okay to feel angry, whatever. What I know about myself, because I wrote to Poppy about it earlier as well, I'm fucked off, I feel like a bit of an idiot, I've made myself a bit of a brat, okay, I know I'll be alright, because I trust that I will be alright. I know I have to go through some sadness, some anger, some fear, and some different bits and pieces, and I still trust that I will be okay, because I've done the work in the past to make sure that can happen. Go and do something for you. Do some exercise, do some therapy, get a hobby, go and do something that's lovely, but still don't forget to give yourself time to grieve. If you want to have sex or play with somebody else, have it, but you will compare. Cinders, we do, Debs, and I practice that, and I'm grateful for things, but I've been hit by 2 new major things on a monthly basis since last September. I'm worn down. I really feel for you on that one, and I'm okay with that. Yeah, still. I have a dark sense of humour about things, but process things as and when needed. Thankfully, I have my artwork to process things more and more, which is beautiful, and I'm glad that you have that. While we were away, so I've just been in America for cheerleading worlds and summits, and I was talking to Shadow, and they've taken on this massive role. It's been really hard for this new group of kids. They've taken on this title from a group of people that were together for 3 years. There were only 3 original Shadow members in this new cheer team. And the old team scored 100 out of 100. They're the only club in the world to have scored that, the only group to have scored that. 3 major world back-to-back titles, etc. And it's really interesting because Andy said, I keep telling you, you're just not listening. And they're taking all this stuff and, and they're saying, I just need to, Andy said, maybe you need to go away and process it. Don't go away, fucking process it now. It's one of the things that we do. I need time for that. What time is enough? Why can't we do it now? Look, sometimes it's inappropriate. We need to bracket something and put it forwards. And Lady Diana just says it best to be emotional alone or in front of your partner who might not want to engage with them. That depends on your partner. What would you say?
I mean, I think ultimately for me, emotions are quite a solitary thing, but for other people it's not. There has to be, I think that has to be a conversation. For some people have been around other people's emotions.
And consent.
Consensual. But if it's really not okay for, I talk about being the closest 5 people to you, that again, it's mean, isn't it? Would you go for 2 pints with somebody? Would you let them look after your dog? And if it's a yes, yes, and no, yes, all that kind of thing. So we have our people. And for me, if it's not my partner, I've got to take emotional vulnerability in these instances. There will be somebody huge or somebody, that can be a partner, great, but that's a really personal question. It depends on the relationship. But I do think some of this comes back to again, it's controversial, it comes back to mindset. I really like your analogy, I've not heard it before about the luggage. Sometimes it comes up first, sometimes it comes up last. I've joined a group on Facebook this week about people who are going to the magic place I'm going to. And they're all talking about putting air tags on their luggage.
I've got an air tag on my luggage.
Yeah, and I understand that in terms of being able to have oversight of it. But it is about that, can you tolerate the whole, well, my bag might be first off, it might be last off, what will be, I'm going to have a book and I'm going to read it until the luggage appears. Or in actual fact, or be looking at, where is it on the plane, is it here, is it? And there is something about just stress tolerance and expectation, and I think more and more there is an expectation that we will get through life unscathed by trauma, by grief, by loss, and the reality is we will not. And what are we going to do when those times, come knocking at the door? And I think, I don't know whether that's really hard, but I try and build that resilience mindset in the people that I share my life with quite early on, because loss is going to be harmful.
I do think it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. What are you going to plan to do about it then? Can this person take it? How do I work with somebody? What does it mean? Do I need to just go and talk to a therapist before I can vent? Do I need to talk to a life coach? Do I need to have some friends? I haven't told my kids or anyone else about this person because it's too much information. And I haven't told anyone, actually. I've got quite swept away with it. That copy of the first person went, oh, for fuck's sake. And sometimes we just need to do that. But I rarely do that as a human being. It's very rare that I reach out and say, I'm not okay. You don't hear that from me. Because I'm the sort of person that does process it internally by myself, with me, myself, and I. And sometimes I just want to connect. So you have to work out what sort of person you are. Of course, therapy can help. Self-improvement can help. Hobbies can help. Things can help that make us feel a little bit better. And we have to work out from that sort of relationship. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it toxic? Was it it doesn't have to break us. And I put 3 links above into 3 different writings that are about abuse and toxicity, because you did privately mention some toxicity in there. It's not necessarily abuse. So those writings are: the breakup doesn't have to break you, the difference between abuse and toxicity, and a grief and all you need to know. I've also got an endings and beginnings one, but they're also a very similar thing. Okay, so
I would say it's really one, but I've done it. Quite unilaterally as well. When I work, particularly when the relationship with dynamic is broken down, quite often in the initial stages, it is still very much clouded by, I will never find anybody. you're very difficult. It's very difficult to objectively evaluate that relationship when you're in that period of postpartum stress. Whereas a lot of people come back to me and go, well, in actual fact, or there was that, or there was, we've actually done some of that in your message that you sent us. I think you're on that journey anyway, in that process, and how we view that relationship a year later in terms of when we're reaching coming out of it is always very, very different. I love people to write almost a TripAdvisor review. It's not a piece of work you can listen to get everyone to do, but I would love to get that TripAdvisor review in the immediate aftermath, and then after a few months of therapy or a year later in terms of how they, and I can guarantee you they're always pulled apart.
They are, and I really think the 5 5s help here, and it's something that helps me is how am I going to feel about this in 5 hours? Fucking awful, heartbroken, shitty, what a cunt, angry. How am I going to feel about this in 5 days? Probably similar. I don't know. I feel like this might be forever. And how am I going to feel about it in 5 weeks? That's a lot longer. That's a month. And if we think about it really logically, we try and engage in that. And how will I feel about this in 5 months? And how will I feel about this in 5 years? And often the answer in 5 years is, well, hopefully I've got somebody else by then, even if I haven't got over this. There are lots of different words that can come into it that can really help us as well. Okay, next question. What actually is a daddy's job?
Well, I know what my daddy's job is. Well, now is that you already made my joke. You stole my joke earlier. But you know, what is the job of the daddy? But I mean, ultimately, what is the job in any relationship? A relationship is a contract, it's an agreement, it's a set of expectations. It might be marriage vows, it might be a contract that you've written down. What are the expectations associated with that? That ultimately is the job description that you have written for that role, and somebody has consented to, endeavour to their best ability because life happens, to meet those expectations. And that's, I don't think there's an answer in terms of what is a daddy's job. We can say ultimately as a relationship where there generally is an expectation of transference of care and what you should looks like. But we could do a whole workshop on what is a daddy. Nobody would agree.
I did a workshop. We would agree on daddies. So that basically at the end of the day, the answer to that is whatever you want it to be. However, I do also think to add to that is there is an aspect of responsibility, of reliability, of consistency, of care, and of compassion. I would also argue that those words really have to be in there with some understanding that people are human. However, there is a leadership and a guiding role there. And I was talking to one of my clients earlier about, some of the differences that we have about maintenance hitting, consequences, discipline, what does that even mean, and all these different words that we use. And the problem with all the words that we use, and I say this all the time, and so does Poppy, is you have to agree on the definition at the end of the day. So a daddy's job is whatever you both agree it to be, with care, consistency, reliability, being able to see things through and carry things out. That has to come into it.
I think a lot of those words that you use now, maybe just me, but I think a lot of those apply to any relationship.
I agree.
Like we have a friendship. One of the things I value about that friendship is your consistency. Those values are important, even when you remove that label of daddy. So, what specifically makes a relationship identify with that term daddy? That's really interesting, and that has got to be. That boils down to the acts that you have agreed to in terms of you both value within that relationship. What makes it different to any other relationship? It's really interesting, isn't it? So for some people might say, a huge part of being in a relationship and identifying with daddy is, I'm in nappies 24/7. That's not my definition of what daddy is. That's not my value in that relationship. So I think it's really that contract, it's that transference of expectation right at the beginning. But even you go on the forums. I go on some of the forums on Vet Life, and even who are in relationships with someone they identify as being their daddy don't necessarily agree on what that daddy is. Do we have sex with adults? Do we not have sex with adults? And that's a big bone of contention fact, isn't it? The reality is what's been negotiated in that relationship.
Yeah, it's what's okay, isn't it? It's all about agreement and writing it down. And I watched a friend says tits up get shoehorned into a daddy role by a script, and it's painful to watch. And do you know what? It is painful to watch. But what each person has is the right to say no. We just forget it sometimes. And that goes back to the beginning when we're talking about our ability to advocate for ourselves and say what is and isn't okay. And tops need to consent as much as bottoms. There is no difference. And there again, although I teach consent, I will argue that there is no such thing at the end of the day. Because it's so controversial. There's no such thing as consent. You can agree to what is in a moment. You cannot understand the consequences. You do not know. It's like there's no such thing as safe sex. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a safe relationship. It doesn't exist. Like they don't exist. We have built these things up in our head to be the be all and end all, and then we get disappointed by them. That's why we've got to agree on what these things are.
And that whole concept of shoehorned, for me, that's about the relationship between boundaries and discussing preferences. Because, ultimately we can say, we've been talking about this for many, many years, Des and I, outside of the daddy question. All of the time people are getting into relationships with switches, and then it becomes apparent that in actual fact they prefer one particular role to another, but one is more of a commodity, therefore it's easy to find a partner if you identify as X. And therefore, what I thought was Y is now Z. That is time immemorial. That's been happening for a long time. At the moment, people are, there seems to be an attraction towards the daddy dynamic. DDLG seems to be really fashionable recently in the last few years, whereas DS and MS, as I think, has diminished in its popularity. But that ability to be able to hold a boundary, well, this is my preference. My preference for a dynamic is X. That's really, really important. So, I appreciate it's in and out of shoehorn, but the responsibility is both sides to be able to hold that boundary and say that's not what I want in this relationship.
Yeah, really true. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one was, how do you keep negotiation fun? How do you perceive negotiation? Comes up for me here straight away. What is your perception of negotiation? Is it fun because we get what we want at the end of it? We're just saying that these are things where it's a no-go negotiation. Are we saying that? But if we don't do it, it's uncomfortable and nobody wins anyway. So it can be enjoyable. We all communicate most days in our own ways. Mr. P said, just as a view, yes, to all relationship normals are and have to be there. To my way of thinking, a daddy takes things that step beyond. The BDSM very caring bit is driven by a nurturing side. Do you know, I think we've got to be careful for kinksters, authority negotiators, and fetishists in any way. I think we have to be careful at saying we are above and beyond. I know some vanilla relationships that are more daddy than anything I would have ever seen. I know some vanilla relationships that are more power or authority transference, power exchange that I have ever seen. And they are intimate and close and deep with incredible communication skills. I think we have to be careful that we don't say, yes, but the daddy makes it more. So I'm not having a go at you. It might sound like I am. I'm sorry if it does. I just think we have to be careful because that ties back into the loss situation for me. And that is that, yeah, but it's just so much more than a normal relationship. Therefore, I've got more to lose. And I think we have to watch the words we use. This is an awesome relationship. It's intimate, it's caring, it's amazing. And I'm allowed to be myself in it. I think that's what's very difficult.
And I think the key to any relationship, we were talking about that nurturing in a daddy relationship, we were talking about DS, that kind of like transferring to MS almost. We have to be really careful about codependence and that concept of, again, what you said, even to us, I would be, this enhances my life, this enhances my existence, this is how I want, however I would be okay. And I think, the reality is when we have a relationship that is based upon nurture, it has to be based upon the empowerment as well, and that's really, really important. You can care for somebody, but they can also be capable of caring for themselves.
And we mustn't take that away. Jesus.
No relationship you should disempower. And that's controversial, but there you go. And it doesn't really matter what dynamic it's wrapped up in. So I think it's about when we say that daddy takes it beyond, I am more than, you can't take that power away from the other person, essentially, is what I'm saying. There has to be everything we do is within an autonomous decision making process, regardless of how the timing goes.
And I've just had a private message, a direct message that says, I feel like having any expectation on another is codependency. I'm trying to find a balance. That's what you're saying. I think expectations are the things that kill us, but we do have some core basic expectations that are really basic. Decency, respect, care, basic communication. I think there are some basic levels where we absolutely should expect those. And we're letting those go actually more and more. And I think we should not. There is a should there for me. And that's very dangerous when you think, oh, it's okay if you don't talk to me for 2 days. It's okay if that's what we agree. It's not okay if we didn't. Or it's okay that you lost your temper with me and called me a. One of Brian's best friends was away at cheerleading with me, and her boyfriend, honestly, his messages and everything is pure domestic violence in every way, shape of the word. He's disempowering, he's trying to take over. And that's from me as a professional. That's not from me as somebody who's just saying, oh, he's not very nice, is he? Oh my God. But to try and talk to her to say, this is really dangerous. And that person, the only thing I can trust anymore is another's actions over a long span of time. Yeah, prove your word. That's not a bad thing. One of the things helping me feel less upset is I said to this person, you're really going to have to prove it to me. And actually they haven't. So thank you very much. You've done me a favour straight away. So I do think we have to think about that. And that's where we also get into negotiation. We communicate every single day. It's really important for us to do this. So there are baseline skills that you have to hone and do just to talk about things. We have to look at negotiation. We have to be able to do it. But we have to be careful not to become too emotional over it. When we're negotiating, if we get into an emotional state or a violent state or an aggressive or a defensive state, it takes us away from what we can do. I'm not saying you have to be a right arsehole or pedantic. I remember having a sit-down conversation with my mum and dad where my dad had done something that wasn't particularly good. It was about money, and my mum was getting all emotional. My sister and I were saying, "You have space for emotion. I'm really sorry. We'll talk about it in a minute. Let's just get back onto the practicalities." And that's hard to do.
But what I'll also say is, if you have really difficulty with having any expectations at all, that to me is something to do with word and something more. I think it is, that's indicative of something.
Again, with negotiation, to make it fun, it's calm, it's compassionate. If we do all the work up front, all the fun comes. If you leave it till the end, none of the fun comes because it's more and more dangerous. So I see negotiation as a positive because I see it as an investment about what's about to be. Whereas if I just keep leaving it and then I go, well, that's it, that's the consequence, it all blows up, it's messy. So I see it as a good thing because what did I read once years ago? If you get all of your skeletons out of the closets, there'll be less broken bones later. Great phrase. Sort it out now.
What is negotiation? How do you make negotiation fun? The first question is, what are you, perceiving to be negotiation or not? I was saying earlier about sharing stories. That to some degree is contracting. There's lots of people do this and checklists, some people like, some people don't. But how are we communicating? How will we negotiate? Are you having those arguments? Are you, in what context are you negotiating things? I think it can be very difficult. I was talking to somebody earlier about, they're saying that they're finding it really difficult, to stick to a date night. They're trying to have a date night once a week and it's on sale, and I'm like, right, I'm off that dating. Oh, okay. You can make anything fun. Negotiation can be really fun, but what are you considering negotiation to look like?
Yeah. How do you see the words? And actually, negotiation is always going to be more palatable to you if you do it from a positive perspective than it's optimistic. I've watched this thing this morning, I sent it to Brian and Andy, my daughter and her partner, so it wasn't related to it. And this guy was talking about how your brain struggles with certain aspects of positivity and negativity. And when we tell someone not to do something, the brain doesn't function. If I say to you, do not think of a pink elephant, you will often immediately see a pink elephant. It's just a classic, we know that. So actually, and he was talking about skiers who are going down a ski slope, and it's full of trees. If you just see the trees, you don't see the route through. Our brains, we have to show the route through. So if otherwise we just see the trees, and then that's way more dangerous. Like, fuck, I don't know where I'm going, oh my God. And that can be really in there when it comes to negotiations. How we see it, the positivity we put into it, what we're trying to get out of it. We need to remind each other that, oh my God, it's going to be so much fun, we can have a great time, this path is leading us here, let's not go off it, we'll come back to that if it really matters, let's stay here. It's really important to negotiate, because if you don't, and you're now guilty of sexual assault potentially, or having something done to you that you thought you'd agreed to. So there's a huge consequence. So try and make sure that you understand each other when you're doing it. Can I just check what you heard? I'm not sure I'm being clear. Can you repeat back to me? Shit, no, that's not what I said at all. Can we go again? Because if we do that and we do that healthily enough, we'll end up feeling better later. And then we're investing into this relationship. As I say, get the skeletons out of the closet, get it sorted, less chance of broken bones later. Makes a real difference. So we need to be clear. We need to get rid of jargon and bollocks, and we just need to put our souls on the line and say, this is so cool. You're getting to know me and I'm getting to know you. And we can both be present with each other and see the pathway, not the trees. I've got a massive writing on negotiation. I didn't particularly look it up because it doesn't talk about how to make it fun. It talks about how to do it, which is slightly different. But negotiation is all about the investment in the future. It doesn't necessarily have to be fun. It's fucking necessary, and it can be positive. It can be great, but it doesn't always have to be fun as such.
You have to go back to as well. So many people that I've talked to is, okay, we've done negotiation now. Negotiation has happened. Up for this now. Negotiations happen, right? We can move on to A and on the road plans. This is something that's living and breathing. You know, I think we have to revisit. You know, you talk about post-mortem. That's part of negotiation. You know, at 360 back, it's my world. But it's really, really important. You know, what was good about last night, what was different. How, you know, I think that's something that really is quite easy to make fun. You know, in terms of talk about negotiation. But I think evaluating something and giving feedback, particularly if you've had a good time, you know, and that can be, you know, I love this, or, you know, an actual fact that you know, that scene that we have has inspired me to write this, or whatever that might be. But that can be really lovely to have that kind of feedback. But essentially what you are doing when you do that is you are negotiating the next thing. This is what worked for me is, well, in actual fact I want to do more than that, and that is negotiating. So it's you know, it's how you see that as a living, breathing continuation of it. Never stops negotiation.
It doesn't, and we change. We change as human beings. Every day we learn something new or we do something different. So you're always dealing with somebody who's growing or somebody who's suffering. So we need to, this is something that needs to become part of our everyday conversation, and it doesn't have to be negative. And Eminem Rope is the name of my Eminem tribute to this song.
Is that my Simon?
I dread to think. Okay, so how can you figure out what is it you want in kink? For example, do I want DS or do I want play? Time.
I went down this list of questions that like literally 5 to. I wrote them down and I went down it, and I was having and I was really honest. I said, out of all of the questions here, that's the one that I find personally most challenging, because I ultimately am the sort of person who knows exactly what I want and knows exactly what I don't want. But I appreciate, obviously, certainly professionally, that that's not necessarily the case for everybody. And I think it's a really, really hard question because, you know, some people just instinctively know, whereas some people take a lot of time to tentatively explore, to work out, to develop, you know, and don't get me wrong, there's things that I've thought I've wanted, and the reality is we've all done that, haven't we? Hell, after his burn, and no, we don't actually want that. But it's really, really interesting. And also, again, this question poses itself as kind of a, you know, it's almost a fait accompli. I'll figure out what I want and that will be it. And the reality is, for me, kink has been, and I hope will continue to be, a lifelong journey. You know, what do I want in the spring of 2023 is probably not what I wanted in the winter of 2020, and that's okay. So don't pigeonhole yourself into this is what I want. I guess it's what do you want right now, and that's okay. How do I work out what I want right now?
And it's also got to fit in some way with your values, your goals, and your morals in life, because shame and feeling shit about these things doesn't help us either. So, do I want to do a little bit of this? Do I push it a little bit more? Let me experiment with this. Let me try. It's all about having an open mind. I know I want power. Well, I want authority transference. I don't really just want play. It doesn't work for me. But actually, those things have changed over the years massively. So we grow and develop. So it's always a question of being curious about yourself, looking at what turns you on, what makes my fanny flutter, as was once put in a Mamma Mia film, like what makes my heartbeat ring through my fucking vulva. That's part of it. But also what makes my heart soar, what makes my brain sing. They all really matter. So, go on.
I think it's absolutely okay if you're the sort of person who is finding it difficult to answer that question for yourself, to kind of reverse engineer that. And sometimes, you know, when you have to start with what do you want, you know, what's absolutely off the list. You know, that's sometimes the easiest place to start. And we were talking earlier, there was once and it was me, what the story was when you talked to me, but they were once in a workshop with somebody, and their response to this is, whatever repulses you, whatever you think you absolutely do not want to do, the reality is you'll be doing it in 6 months' time. And I say that with my tongue in my cheek, because quite often, you know, we do have hard nose that we're not. But there is an element of truth in that as well. You know, we perceive, oh my God, that's oh, 6 months later, you're at the front of the queue, like the cushion to have the opportunity to do. So I think
not everything. I still, even after 40 years, I do not want anyone to shit on me or shit in my mouth.
No, and that's okay too. But again, I guess what I'm reiterating is that idea that this is not aesthetic and such an aesthetic thing.
And we have to learn that that's really okay. So I think we just need to be where we are. And I think what we tend to do within the kink world and within authority transference world and polyamory is we try to go too fast, too quickly, right now. I want it now, I want it delivered, and I want it wrapped. I want to know. Whereas actually, if we're saying, I don't know, and that's kind of sexy and exciting, and I'd like to find out. I don't know if this is going to work for me, I want to try it. And then not to get cross with somebody else if we try something that doesn't work, not to be cross with ourselves, to say, I've learned something, that's cool, that doesn't work for me, oh my God, that does. Or, oh my God, that works for me with this person. That happens too. It doesn't work for me with anyone else. Fuck with you, my fanny is beating. So, or oh my God, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. My heart is, as I said, it can be so many things. My soul is purring. Like whatever it is, it depends on situations. It depends on people. It depends on time. It depends on so many things that also fall into consent. So I think you just have to try it. I don't want to do play without connection. If I don't play without connection, I'll move on and not play without breakfast. It doesn't work for me. I don't want to do sex without connection. I don't want to just do play. Play is part of authority transference for me. I want to please you, therefore I want to do all of this play. It's not that I really want to do play. So that's, you know, we need to get our heads around what works for us. I'm also going to say that's taken me 41 years or however long to get to.
Exactly, and it's, you know, this stuff's not easy. You know, I'm kind of smiling at the irony a little bit. You got two therapists in here, one minute I'm saying the value of consistency. Consistency is so important, and then on the other hand, we're going, but it's all right to change. You know, we're all going to change. We're going to move. We're going to grow.
It's not a boom, is it? It's a gradual impact. It's not like being hit with a fucking leather belt. It's being slowly stretched for fisting. There's a difference.
Yeah. I like that analogy. I'm not sure how often I'm going to be able to use it. It's a niche market. I'll be bringing that one out. I'll probably use the airport and the suitcase one more regularly. I'm not going to lie.
Why not? Yeah. Okay. So, when is a reasonable amount of time after an end of a dynamic relationship to start reaching out to play for non-sexual based kink to anyone else? I'm curious about the non-sexual. I think that almost doesn't have to be there. I think for some of us, kink is sexual, for some of us it isn't. You just need to know who you are, and the other person needs to agree with that. So I think there's a different definition there. How long is reasonable? What do you think, Bobby?
How long is a piece of road? Sorry, but that's my response to that question.
How big is your fist?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I think sometimes we do get that wrong. Sometimes I think this is one of those instances where, you know, more often than not, you will talk to somebody and they say, you know, I did something perhaps a little bit too soon. But I think, are you all right with that? You know, are you all right with you know, merging yourself into experiences? Some people are, and I think it's about having the ability to be compassionate towards yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. It's how you feel. And the reality is, if you felt this was the right time to do it, and then subsequently, perhaps there's that discomfort that happens, it's about recognizing that's okay. What does that tell me? What I learned? What really different next time? But I don't think the right or wrong answer to that.
And I 100% agree with you, and I really disagree with the comment that says get under or over someone to get over someone else.
Yeah, it's such a cliche, isn't it?
Such a load of bollocks. Do yourself, wank, don't wank, have a good time, read a book. do whatever, or go and tie someone up. Everything is okay. This is the problem. If you think, however, you invest in it fixing you, then I have a problem with it. Don't think that it will make you feel any better. So there is no right or wrong answer to that. If there's reasonable, that is such a judgment. And people do judge, people turn and say, one of the questions earlier was like, yeah, but my ex-partner is already reaching out to others to play. Yes, some people do. It doesn't mean they're not hurting. It doesn't mean they're hurting less than you. People deal with hurt in such various ways, so it's really difficult.
I was going to say, it depends on that person. And for me, I know it's very, very different, but it ties in a little bit to that question that we asked earlier about, should I be emotionally vulnerable on my own or somebody else? And it depends on somebody else. And I get that that's a really cop-out of an answer. But the same is true here. When you are working out, processing, getting through shit, do you want to be the person who is, making a connection, working it out with close people, booking a therapy session, or like Tilson I said, where the kind of people who will go away, we will deal with that shit, we'll process, and then in actual fact, when we're reconnecting, we've probably done 99.9% of the work, and we're now coming back to you. And there's no right or wrong way to do that. That's absolutely fine. And it will be the same in a process like this. When do we want to reconnect? Some people will be out at night wanting to reconnect. Other people will want to weaken their bed in their cocoon, and that's okay too.
I also think you have to be very careful about your own attachment pattern here. If you have an unstable attachment pattern and avoidance, it doesn't matter. There are so many fucking titles out there. Whatever. If we have an attachment pattern that isn't very positive for us, and we go looking to hold on to, that's when it's dangerous, and that's when actually we can't always trust our gut, because the gut is telling us, quick, get someone else, quick, go, and it's like, oh no, because actually if you have certain conditions and certain mental health criteria, your need is to do that, and then that's not necessarily healthy. To learn to be alone can be a good thing, but then you need to see a professional about that particular aspect.
And it's what are you looking for as well? Because the question is based in terms
it's the quotes and expectations.
Yeah, it's based around kind of non-sexual kink or sex, but it's not about, like you say, attachment and long-term. I didn't read that question about attachment and long-term relationships, but if that's where this might lead on to, then there's definitely a piece of work there in terms of being mindful about rebound and what that looks like. And we are far more statistically likely to get into unhealthy relationships if we enter into a breakdown of one, and it's about, there's no right or wrong, but there is an ability to be empowered and to be mindful and to go about things in a way that's considered, and understanding what the risks are, and look at risks very much in terms of, I need to have safety tears tucked into my leotard because I'm doing rogue, or this is what I need to have a first aid kit because this is the play that I'm engaged in, and we really don't look at psychological safety. So one thing that I would say in relation to that is, you have to be taking more psychological safety precautions when you're in that stage of rebound or relationships and looking at. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't be looking for sex, kink, or even the next relationship, but it's about how do you safeguard yourself. And I think really we should talk more about emotions.
Yeah. And Karis finds Simon really funny because Simon, how long he's wrote twice the length in the middle to one of its ends, best fits and then he ties people up. Mark said, I think you have to trust your gut, and I agree, my gut's really important, and unless you maybe fall under a couple of criteria around personality disorders and attachment issues, then your gut will say, quick, go out and get someone, which actually, that's not your gut talking, that's your fear talking, so we just have to be aware of the difference. It's so much better to just wait and let the process happen, or not wait and let the process happen. Some of us process quickly. I've been fucking quick in my process today, I'll tell you, that's because I've done it a lot. Tits up, when my dynamic ended, I reconnected with old hookups, which felt like a black backslide at the time, but was ultimately healthy and safe, for sure. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I went back to a very unhealthy play partner for me emotionally, but fucking the best person I could play with physically. And I said to him, I don't know if I'm going to live, I don't know if I'm going to die. It was the 23rd of December. I don't even know what my diagnosis is yet because they can only give it to me after Christmas, but I definitely have cancer. Please, will you fucking near enough kill me and beat me up? I really need it. And he went, yeah, sure. Was it healthy emotionally? Really? And again, it becomes like, what is the need in the moment? And you do have to be really aware of your emotional okayness and safety, and that really matters. Okay, the next question was, how can we heal ourselves after harming another person unintentionally during a relationship or a scene? Oh, hang on, Simon. When you're doing emotional and mental due diligence for a new relationship, how on earth do you know you're being objective enough versus enjoying the rush of new relationship energy? Curious on this one, as it's hard to be human and try and perform those practices. Just don't be human. Like me. No, I'm kidding. Well, maybe not. I think we have to be aware that new relationship energy is something. I think we have to be aware that it's there. It's about awareness. It feels lovely and it feels amazing, and I want this to prove itself. That's always something that comes in it for me. I might be upset, but I was already okay. I have some milestones here. If this person's going to do something or not. Tomorrow was a milestone. He's disappeared today. It tells me everything. And next Saturday was going to be a milestone. You haven't done either of those things. You're not right for me. Even if you came back to me now and said, sorry, I was having a bit of trouble, I'd be like, oh, you're going to have to prove like these milestones are going to have to happen right now. Do send me a ring. So I think we do have to be aware of the impact on us of all of those chemicals and that we are being pulled into something. You mentioned Vulcan. We are in a tractor beam when it's NRE. That's what NRE is. It's a tractor beam that pulls us in. But to be aware of it and be aware of the ship we're sitting in and the impact of it, I can't believe it's all about Star Trek. We just have to be fucking nerds. And we have to be aware that we're in a tractor beam. Just the awareness helps us. It really does. And that makes a real difference. So, and Spock maybe did have it right. He could be emotional and have that awareness. But let's get back to this. How do we heal ourselves? What is made for be with you? Exactly. How can we heal ourselves after harming another person unintentionally? During a relationship or a scene, I can guarantee you are going to hurt somebody no matter what. If you were never going to hurt somebody, you would have married your person who kissed you when you were 4 years old for the first time, even though they were really bad for you. Of course we hurt people. It's part of relationships and it's part of life. And if it's unintentional and inadvertent, there is a big difference between proactively trying to hurt someone. It's about intent. So if you go out to hurt someone, you're a bit of a cunt then, aren't you? And it has a different impact. But we will all hurt somebody at some point and not mean to. We will use a flogger incorrectly. We will fist them with 2 long nails or something. We will hurt them emotionally and really upset someone by something we said or did. And it's unintentional. And we have to learn how to deal with that. And we have to deal with it by looking at what we are feeling. If we're feeling guilty, that's kind of okay because we did something bad. We need to learn how to move on from that, embrace that and say, right, I've learned from that. We have to communicate with the other person. What sort of apology would they like? What do they need? What's the consequence of this? How do we do it? Versus if we feel shame, I'm a bad person for having done that. That's a whole different criteria of how that's needed. What do you think?
I think it's really interesting. I think what I found interesting in this question was the use of the word harm rather than hurt. Because you're right, we always hurt people, and there is a subtle difference, but it's an important difference. And I guess how we view that. For me, harm is far more intentional than hurt. I can answer this from a personal perspective, but I think this is where compassion focuses on self-compassion comes into things. But also, if you look at it very pragmatically, because I'm a little bit like on Deb's now, part of them too. But I think root cause analysis is really important. What I think is we talk about this. But for me, I really want to know the why. If I have been the harbinger, for lack of a better word, of some kind of hurt or harm or something that's had an impact. We were talking about this earlier on, actually, before but we were saying about obviously so much behaviour, people have no real overview of the impact that it has on somebody else, and it's well, I didn't mean that. And it's absolutely fine to not mean that, but you also have to have an awareness in terms of the impact. And I think that's what makes somebody really. We talk about compassion, we use that word compassion all the time. What makes us genuinely compassionate? And I think if I have caused hurt to somebody, I want to know why that's happened. I'm going to explore that with the curiosity that you go into root cause analysis of the situation. I want to really understand, because I guarantee there will be something in relation to systems. There'll be something to do with communication. There will be all of the people who are involved. Why has that happened? And how do I go about ensuring that doesn't happen again? Deb's talks quite openly about some of the things that she's been involved in, obtaining consent from a third party. She uses that example a lot. She's never ever going to do that again. And that there's reasons. So, the harm is done. We have to accept that. We have to get over it. If you get stuck in the how do I heal after harming, if we get stuck in that bit, we're never going to move on to know why is this happening. And for me, there has to be more than these questions. Healing is something that is not static. It's something that is a process. It is a journey to heal, but also learning the lessons. And learning the lessons through this is another. It's for me, it's a linear process. But
Tori agrees with you. She says, he, they. I'm sorry, I know it doesn't say, so I can't see it anywhere else. So I apologise, Tori, if I've got that wrong in any way, shape, or form. Self-compassion and understanding yourself and willingness to hold yourself accountable and learn from the incident to be more proactive in not making yourself feel that way again, and or the other person.
Hold a perspective as well, because the reality is, I know it sounds awful, but I live in a world where quite often I will say, "Oh, we'll do this to me down." And the reality is, there are people who maybe are even in this room, but there are certainly people who we share space with, and when they make a mistake, the consequences are. And quite often, that's not the magnitude of mistakes that we're talking about. We're human beings who don't make mistakes. Be it communicative, be it in play, be it, we thought we got X and we don't know why, or we thought we were in a position to be able to offer such and such, we promised such and such, and now we can't do that, so we common. But ultimately, babies can impact. And I know that's kind of, that's the way that I personally look at things. Other ways are available, but it is about how you have that compassion for yourself and how you go through that process. And I think sharing things as well, I think being able to communicate, being able to talk about what happened is really important when we're in a blame culture. It can be really hard to move on. Whereas if you talk to me about a fuck up, because that's what we're talking about sometimes, a clusterfuck.
I call them clusterfucks, yeah.
Yeah, me and Garrett could quite happily go for a dinner, and we could have a whole evening comparing our lived experience clusterfucks, and that would be okay. So I think it's how you see that. If you are hiding behind a lot of shame because hurt occurred, it's very different to be able to say this has happened, it's unfortunate that happened, this is why it happened, it's not taken away from them, this is not, and with enough time passed, we'll probably have people.
And that's very important as well, isn't it? The whole principle of a clusterfuck happens. It doesn't mean anyone intentionally harmed or hurt anybody else. It means it happened. We might have both played a part in it, but nobody was the victim or the predator. People were hurt, and actually a lot of people in a clusterfuck, if they cause something of harm, did a lot of hurt themselves because they didn't mean to. So it goes all ways, and it's all about my hurt bigger than yours. Is it? How do we work with that? So I do think we just have to take time. We have to live our wounds. We have to self-reflect. We have to understand our part in it. I often talk about one of the major sexual incidents in my life, which wasn't pleasant. I had a part in it. I had a part in it because I decided to stay at home with somebody who's off their fucking tits on drugs. And I made assumptions that they would be all right or not be capable of anything. And actually, so I don't blame myself. I'm not a victim in that. However, I had a part in it. And he is 100% to blame. And I had a part in it. So I think we really have to be careful about where we put blame and what happens, because there are loads of clusterfucks on the scene nowadays, especially with headspaces and different things that happen. Unless you intentionally went out to cause harm, it's something we have to reflect on, discuss, share, and grow from.
And what I will add is, even if you've intentionally gone out to cause harm, there's some merit in talking about that. Find somebody who is, got the qualifications to work through that with you, but have a conversation. Again, it's shame-based. You're more likely to do something again with a far higher significance and a greater consequence in terms of intentionally harming somebody. The greatest, red flag of doing that is past behaviour. And if that is something that it's very hard. These are subjects I can talk about. But if you have, I was talking to somebody about this today. In terms of, we do attract a group of people who identify as unsafe, and that comes with a consequence. Talk about that. I think all of these things about out of the ordinary. You will not be the only person who's intentionally caused harm. About recognising that, what you do with it, and again, somebody said to me, that accountability. How do you take accountability?
And I Poppy shared that I had a situation where I had a third party where I slapped someone pretty viciously around the face because it wasn't all of this, but actually she was enraged and hurt and everything, and it was so hard. And when I found her dogs, it was all a kidnap scenario. It was all very cool up until that point, and it got back again. It was fine. But I thought she was going to kill me. She broke an oak across to try and get to me to kill me. and that those were the days where I was switching, but had done, when I found him and I said, this is just, I forgot to put that on the list. And I make that a really good point, why I would never now negotiate through a third party. However, I'm also going to say that sometimes I forget to put something on the list about myself, or someone does. Shit, no, fuck, don't do that. But the reaction is also part of it. And somebody just wrote privately and said, I found peer reflection and other perspectives on my actions can help me to understand that mistakes happen and how I can improve my actions moving forward. So I think the key here is when we feel ashamed about something or bad, we tend to close in about it. Whereas what we need to do is come out about it and share these stories. But we don't, because we live in such a blame-based environment and say, you're a bad person, you should never have done that, and there's never any comeback from it.
We'll feel vexed because this happened. How often do you see that online, and people think that they've been, helpful to the community by sharing these stories, and they're not. Ultimately, they're not, because that's what we generate from it.
And one of the big questions we ask is, how do we police the community? And the truth is, don't even try. You cannot, you will not, it will not be effective. The people often involved in policing, sometimes more dangerous than others. What better way to be a predator than to be in a group that stops predators? There are so many aspects to this. We're not qualified to do it, we can't do it. It is an impossible task, and yet we all go out to do it. Right, let's just
segue a little bit into the last question almost.
Yeah, but there are 3 questions here. So, are there places for dom-to-dom training? I've only ever seen advertisements for dominatrix doms, but and never anything for the male equivalent. I think even those dominatrix courses are short and sharp, and it's why people go on a dominatrix course. The skills are the same. It's an interesting one. I've never seen. I think the only thing you can do is go to a pro dom and ask for some interaction, some lessons. But my question here is, what are you learning? What do you need to learn and why? Because there are hundreds of workshops that are being done all over the country where we teach how to use bloggers, how to do things, how to use canes. There are writings that are about how to hit someone, how not to. I've just written a massive piece on tits. Everything you want to know about tits, everything. There is so much out there on where to and how to and what to do. How do we learn this stuff? My question also comes into, what do you want to learn and why? Is it skills? And if it's skills, we need to try and find mentors, preferably on the same side of the slash to teach us. Otherwise it can get a bit messy because we go into different headspaces. Can we practice on someone else's someone? We used to, not so much anymore. Things have changed. It's workshops, it's understanding, it's learning, and there isn't a lot there. What do you think?
I think it's interesting. Most people learn everything. I kind of give it on to move on to this beta, but for me, it's about. I have seen doms, by the way. There are talk about gender here because it seems that that's my understanding of the question. I'll do that, but they are male doms who offer pro sessions in terms of teaching space. So certainly,
you will end up paying.
Will end up here, and in terms of skills, those things exist. So again, are we talking about a skill? If there is a skill that you want to learn, for me, it would be finding somebody who has produced things, or who I've got personal recommendations, or they're posting pictures, they're doing things, they're writing sensible writings about it, who I want to learn from specifically. And I would approach them and I would say, I would really value some of your time. This is what I would like from you. Can we have an exchange of some of the services, or do you want financial remuneration? What does that look like? But I'd really like to learn from you. And I think that's okay. It's absolutely okay to approach somebody like that. But in terms of dom-to-dom training, if actual fact what you're looking for is more interpersonal effectiveness and communication, how do I set up a dynamic, or how do I introduce ritual, or how do I integrate a daddy? I've never been in a relationship where I've identified as a daddy, and I want to grow those skills. Essentially, it is about reading, it's about podcasts, it's about webinars. All of those things exist, but and I think we are seeing a rise more in peer-to-peer learning. There is talks actually of people who we are friends with, a more peer support.
I know that Lamb is putting on a whole peer support new thing that come every Friday. Poppy and I, are looking at running a whole full set of workshops over 2 weekends. There is stuff out there. There's not a lot of stuff, but it's so funny because somebody said, I just saw someone self-appointed cis-het male dom guru, and there are tons of male pro doms on Twitter. There are. Fucking interview them though. How are they pro? What have they learned? Why do they know what they know? And how have they learned what they know? And do they know the first aid that goes with it? That's always one of my questions. If you were to cause an injury, how would you deal with it? if they can't answer that question, I don't want to know. What questions do they ask before they even play? Do they understand someone else's state of mind or their skin, or maybe they've had cancer like I have and therefore have all their lymph nodes out on the right hand side? Should they understand that lymph drainage will impact how we play and what we do? If they don't know those sorts of questions, I don't want to know.
Anybody who's self-advocates as well, in terms of, I have a big issue, I always think it's the people who perhaps ought not to be doing these things. If you're putting yourself forward as an expert, you really have to be back. Exactly, you have to be back now. And a lot of the stuff that I see, even online, I've started asking, is that picture a picture? Has it been altered? Has it been doctored? Is there a filter? Was there, in the background somebody with an oxygen tank? Have I used artificial intelligence to generate it? Like, what's real and what's not? And I think you really have to evaluate that stuff. And I think there's something here about the local scene. I find that quite limited. I get that it's very nice to be able to put down to go to lunch and have a face-to-face conversation with somebody who you respect and admire and to really nice to do their coaching with you. But, this kind of thing, there are people here joining us from absolutely everywhere. I'm meeting with people who are on the other side of the world. That's a real privilege. We live in a privileged position to be able to absorb knowledge and information. How many of us attended the MS conference that you were at recently? That's the kind of learning and training that you want to do. How better of an opportunity to do that? I'm literally old enough to remember when you had to get on an aeroplane and go over to the States to attend that conference, whereas now you just have to sign up on the internet. Isn't that lovely? So I think it is about recognising that as well.
There is stuff out there, isn't there? And
why wouldn't it?
And your next question then was, there seems to be a lack of dom support. Should I start something like this up? Where would I even begin? I would do a support group. I would do a peer learning group. I would get other people in, and I would ask people to maybe come in, do a few things, discuss what works and what doesn't. No one is qualified in BDSM. Even if I were to do the 2 PhDs that I quite fancy doing, what they would make me an expert in is a very specific area. Who is good at flogging if you want to learn flogging? Who's good at whips if you want to learn whips? Have a look around, and we look at some people who have a very high level profile with hundreds of thousands of followers because they've got someone marked everywhere in so many ways, and yet they're not taking into account the cervix, they're not taking into account the kidneys. It just looks very glorious, and we seem to be in that sort of world where, oh my gosh, that's going to cause a lot of damage, which is why I keep writing against these things and write, you want to know about tits, for example, as much as I can. And if you want me to write about something, tell me about it, I'll write about it. I will do that as well.
But I think if you're motivated to do something, absolutely build it and do it. It's interesting because we do see, it's in my experience, I've seen several over the years of peer up workshops. They're quite common. You know what? I've never seen a peer wax workshop, never. And wax is quite popular at the moment. It's out there. So I think there are some things that naturally draw that kind of learning. Oh, someone's went to one. See, they do exist.
So I know that there's a few in Sussex, actually, in the south of the UK. There's a particular person I'm thinking of. She does wax and fire and different things.
So I think
like men in sheds is what we're talking about, really. There's local groups that are just for men. I think there's something really important just for men. Anyone who identifies as male, I'm going to expand that. I don't think it should be fully exclusive to you have to have been born with a penis. Those groups are really important because men don't talk, they don't share, they don't learn, and they're scared of that sort of thing. So it like a dom support group that then also had the odd invitee in that would lecture, that would talk, that would do something would be wonderful. So why not start it? But don't, as Cinder's just said, for me, do not then turn and say, I'm the expert, I know all about this. What we have to say is, which is what I say here, is we're talking, but we're facilitating something. Listen to what everyone else is saying. How else do we do it?
No, as a space, that's what I'm saying, so controversial. But again, there's nothing you want to something you're right what you're saying, and there's you're quite right. But there was a really successful gentleman's group that ran for years in Manchester, and for some reason it died a death. But obviously I never went personally, but my understanding was that really did have that peer-to-peer kind of mentality. It started as a lunch, but then they started going, one week they'd go fishing or shooting, or, it evolved into something else. And I think those things have existed, whether they continue to exist, because obviously people get burnt out of different kinds of things and events. So, if you're motivated to set something, you won't set the goal.
Yeah. And it is just keep it basic first of all. I think a lot of people offer workshops, but when someone offers a workshop, I always want to ask, can I ask you why you're offering this workshop? What is your knowledge? Where do you come from? What's your motivation or intention? Is there money involved? Can you coerce people to be with you? Like, what I want to understand where you're coming from and why. And if we put ourselves up, I'm often called an expert by other people, and I have some real areas of knowledge. I do. It doesn't make me an expert. And I have a lot of experience. I have 41 years of experience of doing it myself. Does that mean I'm an expert at it? No, it means I have 41 years of experience. That's all it means. So
from an expert, it's interesting. I was doing some work this week about looking at being literally, the definition of being an expert in legal terms. So an expert witness, right? An expert witness reports, things like that. The definition there is 10 years as a bit of benchmark. So
10,000 hours. They're the two. It's the tens, isn't it?
Yeah. That's, if we're using the word expert, I think it's an understanding that that's, me, you've been on, a couple of months, and that, it's...
And also, people around. We also see people who've been around for 30 years who talk about everything they've done, but they're sexual abusers and predators and complete wankers. So ask others. Ask around. You have to be careful. So, then the last question was, how do we help someone else here? Oh, just a facilitate discussion amongst doms and making an open forum initially. Yeah, great. I think people should do it. You can make them local, you can make them bigger. It's men in sheds, and it's really important. Men's groups are really fucking important because male doms have to be above. They think they do, and they have to be skilled, and they have to be able to hold and rule. They can go rah. You're vulnerable human beings. That's what you are first and foremost. And in this university lecture, it's one of the things I said. Do you see a kinkster or a freak in the sheets and all those weird names that we have for each other, or do you see a human being first? Human being first. Last question, how do we help someone else heal? What were your thoughts?
Oh, my thoughts on that one. Well, how do we help someone else heal? Ultimately, how have they asked you to help them heal? How have they asked you to help them to heal? Because ultimately, that has to be something that they are committed to. Is this come from them or does this come from yourself? And I mean, we see that it's so often. Obviously, I do the kind of work that I do when people come to me and they ask for help, but also over the years I've done a lot of work where I've accepted referrals. You will be amazed at how many percentage of referrals I get from people, and it's not even been discussed with the person first. Please provide therapy to this person, please fix them, please heal them, please do this, please help them move on. Did you know that you're sending a referral through to me? No, go away. And kind of that's my initial reaction to something like that. I understand that we want to help, I understand that lots of us are empathic, that we are driven by supporting people and healers, and that's lovely. But what does the person want? That's where you start. Is it the right time for them to heal? People have to go through a process, and I think it's really, really distressing. I think when we care about someone, or attached to somebody, when we work with somebody, one of the hardest things that there are is to allow people to learn their lessons, to grow, to develop, and you can support that, you can be there, and you can nurture that experience, but we have to be able to allow people to make mistakes. We have to be able to allow people to heal at their own time and at their own pace. And is this about them, or is this about us? Are we uncomfortable with their distress? Do we want them to be better? Do we want them to be fixed? Do we want them to be healed? Or are they asking for a specific kind of support?
And also define healed. Is it yours? Is it theirs? Is it life's? Is it culture's? What does healing mean? I think the best way you can support someone to heal is not fuck them up. Don't make anything worse. Be present. Understand.
Hold space for somebody and ask them what they want. I think that's really important. And if you know, it depends on the relationship. If you know somebody well, you can have the best guess at what I want when I'm struggling to help people leave me alone. And the people who know me know that. But
And to me, yeah, there are times that, like, when Poppy and I are discussing something, whatever, and she can disappear for a day or 2 days, and that's what she needs to do. And then 2 days later, I'll say, "You all right?" And then, there's something else. We all have our own ways of doing things, and sometimes we don't want to be invaded or feel invaded. And so I think society and life and culture has an interesting aspect of how do we help someone else to heal. The question I'm going to ask is it your job? Or let them, the best thing I can say to someone is go and see someone professional. If we're talking about major healing, it's your only option. I've spent 200 grand on teaching people how to heal so far. And I say so far because I'm interested in doing courses all the time. I spent a fortune on it. Does that mean I'm an expert or brilliant at it? No, I'm all right. I get on okay. People seem to do all right around me. It's cool. I love what I do. I'm really privileged to do what I do for a living. It doesn't mean you're necessarily brilliant at it or the best, and it doesn't also mean that you can heal someone. If somebody comes into my therapy room and they say, "Heal me," I'm not fucking Jesus. I'm not a religious person anyway, but I can't put my hands on your head and go, "I believe you're sorry. Get up and walk." That's just not an option.
You can say to somebody who are thinking it, at best you can say, you seem not yourself, or it seems to me that you're a little bit sad today, or it seems like you're stuck, or is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything you need from me? I care about you, is there anything you want? That kind of thing can be really helpful. Sending something to somebody so they know that you're thinking of you. Things like that can be really, really impactful. But the reality is we're not, you're doing a good job if you manage to heal yourself, let alone anybody else.
When we're both really down or something major has happened, there's often a little parcel in the post or a package that's really personal, and that means a lot to both of us. So that really works. But that's because we know each other. It might not work for somebody else. Why did you buy me that? So I think you have to be careful about your definition of healing. How do you help someone heal? Ask if it's your job. Ask them what they want. Is it appropriate? Should they be seeing somebody else? I think we have to think about this.
What you're asking me in that sentence to me is, how do I demonstrate to somebody that I care? And you need to find out what their love languages are, and you need to find out what their love languages are when they're not in the middle of going through something, because that's not going to be helpful. And we talk about love languages in terms of relationships, but it applies to friendship, applies to everything. If we are in that position where we feel that we want to demonstrate care, wonderful. What does that mean?
For sure. My dogs are going mad. That means I've got to go. I apologise because my shopping's just arrived. So we will see you all in a couple of weeks, and I love that you like Jaffa cakes and potted cream pie. That would work for me as well. I'd have to buy it for myself though. So thank you very much for awesome questions, and we will see you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Bob. Thank you later. Wank away. Bye. See you later.
Jaffa cakes as we speak.
Recording